In 2015, I decided to jump the puddle, as they say. That means to sail across the Pacific Ocean, usually with a destination of Brisbane, Australia. They call it puddle jumping because instead of one big crossing, you sail short distances between countless islands, atolls, and islets sprinkled all over that great body of water. They also call it the milk run because of all the coconuts. It would be island hopping in paradise. This is a story about how I did not make it across. The first leg is from Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, to the Galapagos, and from there to the Marquesas, a group of islands at the beginning of French Polynesia. I am not a cruiser or a yachty, which means I don't own a sailboat. The only way to make the crossing was to be crew on a boat. There were a number of ways to do that. First, you can pay your way, which was a bit expensive for me at the time. A second option is to get licensed and help deliver a boat as a paid sailor, but I didn't have enough experience to do that. The last option was to post a note on a marina announcement board and online sailing forums, offering yourself as crew in exchange for a berth. That's what I did. Before I arrived in Puerto Vallarta, I did not have any plan beyond the first stage, posting an announcement. I created profiles, posted on sailing forums, and bought my plane ticket. Down in Puerto Vallarta, I stayed at the Oasis Hostel. It was not close to the marina, so every day I would take the bus after waking up early and eating a pork tamal. The first day, the guards let me in when I explained that I was looking to crew a sailboat. They let me post a note to the announcement board, which was already crowded with English, French, Spanish, and German notes, mostly offering services or selling boat stuff. My note said this: "Hey, my name's Gavin Red, and I'm looking to crew across the Pacific with an experienced captain. I can pay for my own food, and I'm willing to do everything expected of crew, from cooking to watches, hull scrubbing, anything. I'm super respectful. Reach me at Gavin Red, redacted. I'm staying at a hostel nearby, so let's get together and see if we're a good fit." It was crickets for the first few days, but I knew I was a bit early for the puddle jumpers to start gathering here. Another week and it'd be the end of February, 2015. That's when things would really kick off. The hostel was full of young, fun backpackers. They had ping pong and a kitchen, a bar, trivia night. So I wasn't bored. But I knew I wouldn't have endless chances to get on a boat. In fact, it was very possible to fail at my plan. So I decided that I'd stake out the marina every day and introduce myself to captains going in and out. The guards let me in once, but I couldn't get in again unless I was a guest. That strategy ended up working when I made friends with a guy from North Carolina who wasn't doing the Pacific crossing, but was just living the boater's life in different marinas and moorages in Mexico. His name was Wally. He was a good 40 years older than me, but said he refused to officially retire until he was 70. 5 years to go, I told me. But hell, son, you couldn't tell I wasn't pensioned right now, right? Wally got me a guest pass. He knew I was trying to get on a boat, and so he would introduce me to everyone, whether he knew them or not. The marina has a common area for boaters, near the dinghy dock. It had lots of couches, tables, chairs. There was a bar there and a restaurant. They had showers and other facilities too. "It's fucking expensive, son," Wally'd say. "Even for Mexico. They know they can get more out of the gringos." It was true, of course. Of all the cruisers I met, none of them were Mexican. British, Canadian, Aussies, Kiwis, Americans, Europeans of all sorts. Boating is expensive. I think that explains it well enough. It's a privileged life, despite the difficulties. A few weeks passed. I met a lot of people. I got to know Wally, and he even invited me out on his boat, which was in one of the marina berths. I learned more about boating, especially terminology, and helped him out on all sorts of tasks. One day, having just arrived at the marina with a tummy full of tamal, I approached the common area. Empty beer cans littered some of the tables. There was a man I hadn't seen before, dressed in all black. Black jeans, black flip-flops, black bandana holding back shoulder-length blonde hair, a black sleeveless shirt that had no design or logo. Interesting choices for Puerto Vallarta. Wally was sitting on one of the couches and called me over. "This is Sandy," he said, full of giddiness and motioning to a woman maybe 10 years his junior. "Son, Sandy is a catch." I said hello as she blushed. Wally, she scolded playfully. You Gavin? The intrusive voice was from the black-clad guy sitting at his table nearby. Wally and Sandy's smiling faces looked toward him. Yes, this is Gavin, said Wally to the black-clad stranger. He's a great feller. Known him a few weeks now. He's looking to crew to the Marquesas. Are you going that way? Wally was always pitching me before I could speak. I am, he said. His accent placed him in Germany. He stood, and I saw that his tight jean pockets were packed with rigid objects, like scissors or nail clippers or the like. He joined us at the couches where we were sitting. I shook his hand. Nice to meet you, I said. I don't much like the crew, he said. I have had bad experience with past crew. Bad crew, very lazy. He ain't lazy, said Wally. He helped me fix the bilge pump on my boat the other day. I looked at my hands. I read your notice. You are American? Yeah. Americans can be very lazy. Just a minute there, cowboy, said Wally. I mean no offense, said the man. Just some experience that I had. It is not a problem anymore. So you're doing the puddle jump? I said. Yes, I will go first to Marquise, he said, using the French word for the same islands. I will go to Tahiti, and I don't know from there. Do you need crew? No, he said sternly. Oh, I am a single handler, on a 40 Chioi Lee. Maybe you can crew. Oh, you need crew then? No, he suddenly said with an elevated voice. Wally had sat up a bit and the man noticed. I am sorry. I mean that I do not need crew. I might want the company, yes. Wally eyed me. Oh yeah, of course. I didn't mean to suggest you needed anyone to handle the boat. That is it, he affirmed. The conversation moved to other things. That was the moment I met Conrad. In the next few days, I didn't see much of him. I had other leads on crew positions, but they proved unserious. Then came a very strange day. I'm heading out, said Wally. His eyes were darting in different directions. It wasn't like him to be so fidgety. Oh, I said. And Sandy? Wally waved his hand dismissively. I see. Hey, are you all right? Listen, he said, looking fixedly into my eyes. Don't go with Conrad. Conrad? Oh, the German guy. I think that ship has sailed, so to speak. Don't joke, he said in a harsh little whisper. It was really unlike him. Where are you going? Back over to La Paz? Pay attention, listen to me, he snapped. Your captain will show up. It's still early. Just don't go with Conrad. Whoa, I uttered. What happened? His eyes were clearly searching mine, but he didn't say anything. He just stood up, pulled me to stand, and gave me a hug. It was too bad he wasn't heading west. It would have been a comfortable crossing. At least, it wouldn't have almost killed me. The rest of the week, I actually didn't go to the marina. It was depressing to have lost my only friend. I still had a guest pass, but I knew the guards wouldn't care by now. I spent my time meeting travelers in the hostel, surfing some and eating tacos. Got a bad sunburn, had a cute backpacker I met lather on some aloe vera. That was nice. But the adventure called me back. I checked the online forums. No luck. I met a lot more people over the next couple weeks. Made some acquaintances, joined some parties in the marina's common area, got invited onto some boats to hang out. People were interested in me. I had the general feeling that I'd find a boat soon, having been accepted so easily. But most people weren't looking for crew, and days turned into weeks. I saw more cruisers pull anchor and head west. I couldn't be mad. I didn't have a boat. I didn't deserve to be on someone else's, I guess. But I really wanted to cross the ocean. February was long gone, and March and April had slipped by almost unnoticed. I wouldn't have noticed either if not for two things. The window for sailing across the Pacific was closing fast, and my bank account was hurting because of the hostel. Maybe I hadn't planned this so well. Maybe I just buy a plane ticket home and get a job. Do the normal thing. Hey, tienes que irte, someone said. I perked up. I was alone in the common area, at a table cradling a Coke. What? I said. It was one of the guards. You have to leave my friend. Oh, but I'm just, looking to crew. You're not allowed, he said. I've been coming in here for months. Mesas, I emphasized. No good amigo, he said. Well, that was it. I stood, cuddled my Coke, and began to follow the guard out. I felt melancholy. My adventure didn't happen, so I'd end up going home. I guess I met some good people, ate good food. At least there's that. Gavin, what are you doing? Both the guard and I swiveled to see black-clad Conrad storming toward us, all 6'6" of his height. I hadn't seen him for a long time, and it was a surprise, but also he was fuming. We both stumbled backward, expecting to be run over, but he stopped short. What? I said, bewildered. You are coming, are you not? Coming? On your boat? I said. He looked at the guard and at me. Get the fuel jug and put it in the dinghy, he said, pointing. Oh, if I can come, I thought about Wally's warning, disregarded it. Stupid. Sure, I can come. Get the jug, he ordered. I knew the guard didn't care that much if I had a boat to join, but when I tried to explain that we're cool, Conrad gave me a stare that said, "Don't you fuck with me, American." I don't know why, but I submitted and hustled over to the jug he pointed at. The guard left. At the dock, I set the jug into a dinghy that Conrad had boarded. Tomorrow we leave. Come back 5 a.m. We go to Galapagos, then Marquise. Excellent. Will do. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Next morning, I checked out of the hostel, took a taxi to the marina, met Conrad in the dinghy, motored out to his Chioi Lee 40 monohull. I stashed my backpack in the V berth, then joined Conrad in the cockpit. Something about leaving a moorage is romantic, poetic, especially when the sun is near the horizon, making colors that paint the world brilliantly. This morning, alto cumulus cloud cover stretched like a duvet over the world, letting the sunrise peek under it to light its bubbly underbelly with yellows and oranges for as far as one could see. I love that feeling, upwelling in the chest, a bit of happiness at observing natural phenomena. I turned to share something of what I felt with my new captain, but Conrad wasn't Wally. He was sitting down holding the tiller, still wearing black jeans and flip-flops, but shirtless. I don't know if this was the moment that I realized something was off, but I know it's a moment that stands out to me because of how swiftly the wonder I'd felt was smothered in dread. Conrad was looking at me with a wide grin and glintless eyes. While one hand held the tiller with a white-knuckled grip, the other was scratching the hair on his chest in a queer, rhythmic motion, bending the fingers swiftly without moving the hand. It was absolutely bizarre. Quietly, he turned to the nav computer as we cleared the last buoy. I felt sick. Was it the boat, seasickness, or something deeper and darker that I couldn't identify back then? He was like a plastic figurine, staring without life, without even blinking. What the hell? I remember thinking, what the hell have I gotten myself into? Why didn't I listen to Wally? Is it too late to swim back? No, don't be stupid. It'll be fine. It'll be just fine. Over the next few days, I learned more about what to expect from Captain Conrad. He was unpredictable. His mood shifted in ways I couldn't read. I would be on watch, which is when someone keeps a lookout for other boats to correct course and avoid collision, and he would emerge from the cabin frenzied and scream at me, "Are you aware? Do you see? Are your eyes open?" before scurrying back down and slamming the hatch. Or I'd be up at the jib, the forward sail, manually rolling it out under his direction, normal enough for an old Chioi Lee, when suddenly he'd take a different tack awkwardly into the waves, which would pummel me as we dove into them, throwing me off balance. Or I would be cooking dinner, and he would be sitting there reading one of his autobiographies of obscure entomologists. I could write this whole thing about his book collection, and he'd command me to make something else, even if I was at the point of serving. Suffice it to say that Conrad had mental issues. As crew, you're not in charge. You are utterly not in control. You do as the captain says. That's just law. On international water, it is very much the only pertinent maritime law that I knew of. Despite Conrad's behavior, I still did what he said, and held my tongue otherwise. But then came the doldrums. Near the equator, the northeast and southeast trade winds converge, resulting in a latitude of calm water. A sailboat is becalmed, meaning it sits in low to nil winds. Some cruisers turn on their motors at this point, to advance at least a little bit. We did not. The wind was quiet. When there was any at all, our sails luffed and did not catch enough to go forward. When the boat stayed becalmed, it rocked back and forth along its length. I got seasick and threw up over the transom. It's like a cruel ride. I couldn't tell if Conrad was also sick, but he was withdrawn. So much so that I ended up taking over all duties on the boat. When I cooked for him, he retreated to the V berth to eat and make cackling noises. He would come out and disappear again into his insect books. I felt afraid to sleep in my berth because it was just the bench in the main cabin, not my own private space. He slept in the V berth with the door shut. I tried to spend more time above deck. When I did sleep, I did so outside in the cockpit, but it meant there was no one on watch. The autopilot would steer. I suppose it wasn't terrible. We were not in any major shipping lanes. Anyway, I found a bit of solace out there alone in the soft nights. One night, I was alone at the bow. We were bobbing back and forth. I sat on the forecastle, my legs straddling it and dangling, toes dipping into the warm water at irregular intervals. Still becalmed, the water lapped against the hull in small noises. No bugs, no wind, no cold, no heat. Quiet enough to hear the moon. I need to recount this correctly. I felt a chill run down my back. At that very moment, I heard a harsh, shuddering whisper and spun around to see Conrad, fully clad in black jeans and hoodie. His face was drawn back like a starving cave dweller, his skin ice blue. I could see his breath in the air even though it was warm out. His unshaven whiskers looked like stab wounds. "My worship," he said. I can't describe it. Shuddering whisper, I wrote, but it was voiced. It was deep and fragmented and full of terror. It was so fucking quiet out that his voice felt right beside me, as if his lips were breathing the words into my ear. I was so scared I jumped up and slammed my knee against a stanchion and wailed in pain. Conrad didn't move a muscle, didn't look at me. "What the hell?" I screamed. Nothing echoes where there are no surfaces to throw sound back at you. Becalmed on the water, in profound dark of night, in the biggest open space on the planet. I felt the claustrophobia of being trapped in a tiny room with an insane man. His empty eyes, glintless even as they looked up toward the moon, were like matte marbles. His lips looked frozen, his shoulders thrown back in some kind of incongruous clutching posture. I half expected an alien to burst from his chest, but that absurd yet relieving thought was damned by his frightening words. "My worship," I heard him say, "we are for your depths." This moment was a threshold. I'd been obedient to this point, as crew should. Perhaps my role had blinded me from his growing lunacy, and this was the last straw. I screamed and rushed past him back toward the cockpit. I went down into the cabin and entered the head, the toilet, slammed its door shut and flipped the lock. The shock of the LED light felt unnatural. The plastic walls reflected my rapid breathing at me. What had just happened? I'm so fucked. Needless to say, I did not sleep. I did not hear Conrad enter the V berth. It was morning now, as the porthole let in the first rays of morning. The wind had picked up. We were moving. I emerged from the bathroom. "Finally," said Conrad, who was cooking at the gimbal stove. "You Americans, you have no style." I couldn't speak. He was still wearing his black jeans, bare feet, no shirt, hair loose around his face, as if last night had not happened. "Are you okay?" I managed to ask. "Yes, fine. We are underway. Air power. We will not go to the Galapagos. We go straight to the Marquise." I froze, my tongue working its way into movement. I wanted to say no. The Galapagos was only days away. The Marquesas were weeks. I needed to get off the boat. This man was clearly not right in his head. His behavior had transformed into something unclassifiable. Dangerous? Insane? I didn't know. I had to get off the boat. "Fine," I said. It shocked even me. Perhaps his normality was suddenly disarming. I couldn't bring myself to demand the captain do what I wanted. I was just crew, Nothing but a tag-along. Did I doom myself? What should I do? There were a few days of what I could call a new normal. Conrad was unpredictable again, and it frightened me. But the episode on the deck that night did not repeat itself. I did not lock myself into the head at night. Then came the storm. Something all prospective crew should learn to do. Verify the seaworthiness of the boats you're about to board. Your life depends on it. I had sailed before, but I didn't have enough experience to know what to look for. Wally had mentioned this. We'd had conversations about it. But cruisers had an air of knowing. Most of them talked about sailing 90% of the time, and the other 10% talked about how expensive it was. I passively accepted that anyone gearing up to cross the Pacific Ocean was doing so with equipment and a vessel fit to task. The storm arrived in a torrent of water breaching the roof hatches. That is when I learned the boat was not watertight. It came in great waterfalls through all openings, the hatches, portholes, even the mast's electric access. Water coursed down over the navigation equipment that apparently was not sealed against water either, because it shot sparks into the air and popped and smoked. The whole boat shuddered under a second wave that knocked us down. That means our mast was against the surface of the water for a moment, and the starboard hull was momentarily our floor, and it felt like ages for the weight of the keel to right us once more. Conrad snapped into action. We went above deck. I learned we had no life vests. We had no lifeboat, only the dinghy. We had only one small harness to attach ourselves to the line that led to the bow, where we'd have to collapse some of the jib. We did all this, knowing at any moment another wave could crash across the boat and sweep us into the surf. Conrad wore the harness anyway, so it'd have been me lost at sea. "Need to heave to!" he screamed over the rasping wind and rain. The halyard snapped against the mast. The boat creaked under the onslaught of waves. After securing the smaller jib, we worked our way to the mainsail and lowered it to a third of its surface area. Back in the cockpit, we disengaged the autopilot and turned the boat into the wind. The insufficient motor now turned on and struggled to execute just one movement. Finally, it pushed the boat over a cresting wave, and the downward momentum breached a threshold, after which our position had the mainsail backwinded counter to the jib. I turned off the engine. The boat now had no forward momentum, and sat hove to at a 60-degree angle to the oncoming swell. For the first time, I looked out across the night to perceive the raging storm that had engulfed our small vessel in endless whitecaps. Mountainous waves like marching Tolkien oliphants raised us to impossible heights before dropping us into troughs that seemed like they'd consume our boat for a snack. No lightning, but stinging rain and sea wash lashing us from all sides. A deep rumble vibrated the boat, as if the storm spoke. I followed Conrad into the cabin and secured the hatch behind me. Neither of us spoke. We were soaked. I changed into a dry pair of trunks. Conrad went into the V-berth and closed the door. I settled onto my berth, electing not to eat. I had to brace myself against the opposite berth with both legs to not fall from the horrible pitch of the boat. Loud whining noises came from the wind blasting the halyards. I heard the metallic snap of a stanchion. Then terror. A fearsome scream from the V-berth that rattled the door. A loud thumping and more screaming. Bloody screams. Terror and pain vibrating louder than the storm itself. Any elation I might have felt from the above-deck tasks of securing the boat were drowned in my abrupt petrification. "Mom," I thought, and whimpered. "What's happening in there?" I did not sleep. The storm howled. Conrad raved. I retreated to the cockpit when the sloshing water in the cabin began to turn red from under the V-berth door. For hours, my muscles braced and tired. The boat was smashed by crashing waves, rocked. I had clipped in using the only harness. I wore a rain jacket with hood now. It was warm, but it shielded me from the harsh rain. The autopilot kept the tiller. We stayed hove to. Alone in watery mountains. If the boat failed, none would know. We would simply disappear. My mind raced. I should be terrified of the storm, I thought. But the screaming pierced both the V-berth door and the closed cabin hatch and tormented me. I screamed a few times, but it was tiring. Fear is tiring. One moment I knew I'd die drowning, thrown overboard. The next I'd doze off even in the face of the storm and Conrad's endless screaming. So tired. I'm so tired. I slept. Conrad's face was right in front of me. I searched for energy to scream, but had none. My body hurt. I'd slept braced in the small cockpit, sloshed around. He stood on the steps, his torso exposed through the hatch. My eyes hurt from salt water, more when I rubbed them. Though the storm had calmed some, it was still whistling as it whipped pieces of the boat. It was morning, that deep gray early morning. I struggled and kicked, pushing myself as far away from Conrad as possible, my back against the transom, my eyes coming into focus. It was still eerily dark, but I could make out that Conrad was holding something. He had on his hoodie and I couldn't see him clearly. But he stepped up into the cockpit, and then I saw it. His face. He had no eyes, no ears, no lips, no nose. It was a bloody, mangled mess of flesh, ripped skin and muscle and bone, stark white in the gray light. A distinct smell permeated the short distance between us. Butcher's shop smell. I threw up immediately. I could see his breath, noted it was cold out as well. He nursed a large object in his arms I couldn't recognize. Looked like a lantern. His pockets were pulled out of his jeans, emptied of whatever had been in there. Blood soaked his hoodie, his jeans. He bled, and the sloshing water turned crimson. I scampered out of it and onto the bench beside the tiller. I struggled to describe this again, worse than before. His voice. Without lips, he sucked air, and in that thick German accent, he spoke in a shuddering whisper. My worship, I come. His head turned south-southeast as if he could see. I stayed as far from him as the cockpit space allowed. He took a step in that direction. My reliquary, he hissed. Wind snapped the stanchions lightly. The boat rocked. He balanced perfectly. He held up the lantern and repeated, eager this time. My reliquary for your depths. I noticed thick globs of blood dripping rapidly from the lantern. The cockpit water became darker red. I threw up into it again, unable to retain the disgust and fear and pain. His bloodied and cut hands unlatched the lantern and opened it. He began picking things from it and throwing them into the chop. They disappeared under the surface with a little red splash. They were the pieces of him. I saw him try twice to grip a slimy eye and discard it without a second thought. His nose, his ears. My reliquary, he shuddered. Then, drawing breath through blood-caked, lipless teeth, he yowled, like a cat's deep lament. We are for your depths. He threw his arms out, the lantern crashing into the waves, threw his head back. He stomped up onto the bench and leaned over until gravity pulled him fully overboard and into the ocean. Blood-red splash as he fell in. Despite my fear, I rushed to the side and looked down into the water. We were hove to and not moving. The storm still raged, but I could somehow see the shape of Conrad's body sinking. This part I don't expect anyone to believe, but I know what I saw. It seemed that an unnatural swell formed and lifted the boat. It was not in rhythm with the marching Oliphants. I did not see anything per se. But when Conrad's outline finally disappeared, it was under a great shadow that seemed to sweep across leagues of space. Something was down there, beneath me. Not a shark, not a whale, something else. I knew in that very instant, and I had no words to react. I threw myself down into the cockpit, elbow deep in the rancid, bloody water. I sat there shivering in shock, and didn't move until the storm had stopped, and the rancid water had filtered down into the bilge. Nothing registered. I lived through some untold nightmare, but I was still there, on the boat in the middle of the sea. Somehow my muscles moved and I did things. I pumped the bilge manually. I picked things up from the floor. I kept the V-berth door shut after I glimpsed its horror. My body hurt. My head pounded. I was hungry. The engine was broken. The solar panels pulled no juice. The navigation was fried. My last resort was the radio. I turned it on to VHF channel 16 and repeated Mayday a few times. No answer. I organized myself enough to cook and eat. I reset the sails and got underway. Not knowing where I was, I just went north. We had to be close to the Galapagos. Soon I would hear a Spanish accent over the radio, I thought. A few days later, I got my answer. "Hello," came the voice. They spoke English, no accent that I knew. "Mayday, I'm a boat. We were in a storm. The captain is gone." "What are your coordinates?" "I have no navigation. I don't know. The boat's name is Ria. We left Puerto Vallarta about 2 weeks ago, going to Marquesas. I need to get to land." They were able to locate me. A rescue vessel was dispatched and found me a day later. When they hauled me aboard, I was surprised to find that they were not Ecuadorian at all. Some looked Polynesian, others European. "Where am I?" I said. A large woman wrapped a blanket around me. "We were about to ask you that," she said. "The dispatch said you came from Mexico?" "Yeah, about 2 weeks ago." 2 weeks? She chuckled and shared some looks with others of her crew. "That's impossible. Where am I? Who are you all?" "We're out of Pitcairn Island, my fellow," she said with a smile. "Seems you drifted quite a lot further than you thought. And you probably bumped your head too if you think you're 2 weeks from Puerto Vallarta." "That's my story. I was taken to Pitcairn. It's extremely far south. It's 2,800 nautical miles from the Galapagos. It's about 2,000 from Hiva Oa in the Marquesas Islands. It's the island furthest from any other landmass on the globe, and I was well south of it. No man's land. What I'm trying to say is that the lady was right. It is impossible that we drifted so far off course. We were hove to. We shouldn't have been moving at all. We were only a day from the Galapagos, for God's sake. Look at a map and you'll see how insane I must have seemed. Of course, they never believed me. They never went aboard the boat because I had to climb a rope ladder onto their ship. They didn't see the horrors Conrad left me. Worse, there was no record of Ria at Puerto Vallarta. There was no record of any German captain named Conrad there. I'm still trying to find his family or anyone that knew him. I can't even get in touch with Wally because we never exchanged information, and he's not on social media. I never learned either of their last names. That's it. You've made it to the end. It's February 2023. I've lived 8 years of my life with nightmares of the ocean. They say you need to confront your fears, so that's what I'm doing. I'm in Puerto Vallarta again. I own my own boat, a cheap boat, but it's mine. She's seaworthy. I stocked up not for the milk run, but for Pitcairn. I'm going back there. I have to know that what I saw was real, if it is really more than a tale, even if it costs me everything. In case I go missing, I'm leaving my information here. I'm lifting anchor on March 15th. My boat's name is Redemption. My name is Gavin Red. I'm heading first to the Pearl Islands, then the Galapagos, and then to Pitcairn. From there, my destination is redacted, deg redacted, redacted, deg redacted. I'm giving myself 2 months. I'm not taking crew. Don't follow me, for the love of God.